and she teaches me many things, and she loves me. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Peter. Thank you all for your wonderful testimonies and your tributes to your mom. Like I said, before we get into our recap, I just want to ask, I know you guys have heard a lot people say, give your mom your flowers while she's alive. Would anybody like to tell me what you think that means, or if you know what that means? Give your mother your flowers while she's alive. Any volunteers? For anybody who could tell me what that saying means.
I, I think Gabe is raising his hand here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Gabe.
No, I'm just raising my hand to scratch me.
Okay, go ahead, dear.
I think it means maybe how when people die, you usually give them flowers as thank you. But as your mother, if you give them flowers while they're alive, you're like saying thank you for all you've done for me.
Amen. Exactly. Yes, this is true. Good job. So that definitely saying meaning when you're giving your mother your flowers, yes, you can give her flowers in her hand, but also you can give her flowers while she's alive by thank. This is what you guys are thanking her for all she's done, being obedient, being successful, listening, doing your schoolwork, always, being kind to your mom, always acknowledging her. These are things that you can do, and physical flowers are good, but that saying means give her all you can. Do what you can while she is alive. Let her know you appreciate her, you love her. That's what that saying means. So thank you all. So we want to continue with our lesson recap from last week. If our media could play the video that we shared last week.
In the land of Israel, there lived a prophet by the name of Samuel. God told Samuel to go to Bethlehem, where he would find a young boy named David. God told Samuel to anoint David as the new king of Israel. He was to replace Saul as king, because Saul had turned away from the Lord. At that time, Saul and the men of Israel camped in the valley of Elah, where they were preparing to fight the Philistine army. David's brothers were among the men of Israel. So David traveled to the valley to bring more food and supplies to his brothers. As he stood on the hill overlooking the valley, he could see both armies on either side. When David arrived at his brothers, he found them hiding from the scary Philistine army. The Philistines were great warriors and many in number. For 40 days they had been shouting insults at the men of Israel, calling them cowards. In the Philistine army, there was a man called Goliath. He was bigger and scarier than any of the other Philistine men. He was a giant. Goliath was afraid of no one and challenged the men of Israel to come out and fight him. But everyone was too afraid. Day and night, Goliath mocked the God of Israel and the army of Saul. While David was with his brothers, he saw Goliath come out, and he heard his insults. David couldn't believe it. Now David was a brave young man, and he loved the Lord. He would not stand to hear Goliath insult God or his people any longer. Word got around of David's inquiries about Goliath, and King Saul sent for him. With great courage, David told Saul that he would fight him. Saul knew the Lord was with David, so he agreed to David's request. Saul clothed David with his armor, his sword and shield, but they were too heavy, and David could not even walk. In the end, David decided to fight Goliath with his slingshot, the one weapon he used as a shepherd and knew best. David went outside, picked up 5 stones, and walked towards Goliath. Goliath laughed at David. the Spirit of God came upon David and empowered him with courage and bravery to fight Goliath the giant. David knew he could not do this alone, so he trusted God to give him and Israel the victory. As Goliath charged towards David, David shouted, "You come to me with a sword, spear, and shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." So David took up his slingshot, put in one of the 5 stones, and started swinging it in the direction of Goliath. As Goliath drew near, David released the stone, and with great force, it struck Goliath in the middle of his forehead. Instantly, the giant fell to the ground on his face and died. That day, God gave David and Israel the victory. David ran towards Goliath and stood over his body. David took Goliath's sword and cut off his head. When the Philistine army saw this, they were afraid and ran away. When the Spirit of God came upon David, who was just a little shepherd boy, he became a brave warrior who defeated a giant.
Thank you, media, for playing that video. Okay, Sunday school. Can who would like to for a recap? Tell me what we talked about last week about this story about David Goliath. Can anyone tell me last week what we talked about concerning the story? Any volunteers? Okay, does anybody remember? Okay, can anybody tell me the 2 people that I brought up last week? I brought up 2 people from the Sunday school, and we did comparisons about their physical. Can anybody tell me who we brought up last week? Go ahead, Wati.
Me and Elijah.
Uh-huh. And who else?
Me and Elijah.
You and Elijah. Yes, that's correct. And can anyone tell me the comparison between you and Elijah and the comparison between David and Goliath? What were the similarities and physical comparison that we spoke about? Okay, I'm just going to call volunteers. Brother Peter, go ahead.
Elijah was bigger and Wati was smaller. The same thing with David and Goliath.
Okay, that is correct. And what is also similar that we said about Wati and Elijah and David and Goliath concerning the battle? Go ahead, Noah.
David killed the Goliath with his sword.
Mm-hmm. That is true. David did kill Goliath with his sword, but we also showed how David was small in stature. Wati was also smaller than Elijah. Of course, Elijah and Wati are not going in battle, but we showed the similarities, and we also said it is not what you have, but it is who you have with you that will allow you to fight the battle. And as the story said in the end, as you can see, David had God with him, and that's definitely what makes a difference. And can anybody also tell me anything from the story and that what we talked about last week that stood out to them? Any strong message that you remember that, you took with you? Okay, go ahead, Pharaoh.
What I remember was that even though David was afraid, he persevered, and he also took down Goliath without holding back.
This is very true. This is very true. He still persevered. Yes, even though he was small, he didn't fear because he knew that he had God on his side. And as we said, once you have God on your side, you can overcome anything, you can conquer anything. From what I remember, I'll tell you what I remember as well. A lot of people, when I asked what were their fears, they said they were afraid of snakes, spiders, And even if there is a spider or a snake in your way, if you feel that afraid, you can call upon God anytime and he will help you. And God definitely hears you as well. As we know, he answers prayer. And anytime you're in a situation where you have any type of fear, you just call upon the name of God and he certainly will be there for you. Does anyone else want to share anything personal, anything that you took away from the story, anything that you can say, this story definitely speaks to me because I was in a situation where I had fear. Does anyone have any experience, anything they want to share, anything that they remember from the story, anything that they know that can help them? Let me just see. Okay, go ahead. I believe that's Noah.
Goliath, I was taller than David.
So I will say this. So if you have someone in your life, a Goliath, may it be a snake, spider, may it be a person. And like you said, David was smaller, Goliath was taller. But the important thing to know is once you have God on your side, you can fight anyone, anything, just like David did. So I'm going to call on another volunteer here. I'm going to call on, let's see, TJ. Would you like to share with us anything you remember from the story? Any experience?
That God, if you trust in God, you can always win the battle.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you so much for sharing that. How about you, Wati? Anything that you learn or remember you could take away from the story?
That if you're small, you can still win.
That's right. Last week, everybody said that Elijah was going to win the boxing medal because they saw Elijah was bigger than you. But I told you personally, and anyone can take it away, if any of you, doesn't matter how small you are, if you have God on your side, you can win any battle. So there is the end of our Sunday school for today. Thank you all so much for coming and for being good listeners. And I'd like to call on a volunteer to close us out in prayer. Okay, Noah.
Let's pray. I pray that everybody will be good at church, and I pray that the style's better, and I pray that everybody will be good in this church, and I pray that everybody will be nice to each other, and I pray that everybody will be good. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sunday school. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Hi, Auntie Tina. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Gina. I'm going to ask one or two people if anybody